way for everyone to
Yes, let's see what it
His
says.
family is an immigrant from Syria. He's here selling salabia, which is this super tasty, crispy, waffle-like pastry. Right next to Ernest is an ice cream seller who has a problem. He's run clean out of dishes to serve his ice cream in. But Hamwi doesn't just stand there. He takes one of his crispy salabias, rolls it into a cone, and hands it over to the desperate ice cream dude. The ice cream seller then scoops some ice cream right into this newly formed cone. The customers lose their minds over this revolutionary way to gobble down ice cream. It's portable, it's convenient, and it's delicious. Number 4, cornflakes. It all started with the Kellogg brothers, John and Will. These two were running a hospital. Their job included making sure their patients ate healthy food, which often meant baking bread. But one day, something unexpected happened. The Kellogg brothers had prepared a batch of wheat dough for their daily bread-making task, but they accidentally left this dough out overnight. By the time they got back to it, the dough had started fermenting. John tried to fix things by rolling out the dough. He was hoping to get rid of the extra water, but instead he got wheat flakes. His brother saw a golden opportunity in these flakes. He decided to sell them. But with corn instead of wheat, John wasn't too happy about this, because he believed it was wrong to profit off what was meant to be a health food. But Will went ahead anyway. He started the Kellogg Company. He also added sugar to the cornflakes to make it more tasty, and started marketing it to kids. Number 3, Vaseline. So, back in the 1800s, there was a chemist named Robert Chesbrough. He was visiting some oil rigs when he noticed something cool. The workers oil rig were using this weird, jelly-like gunk that built up on the machines to help heal their cuts and burns. This gooey stuff was actually a leftover from drilling for oil, something most people saw as waste. You've got to hand it to the first guy who thought rubbing oil residue on an open wound was a good idea. But, it turns out, they were onto something. Chesbrough decided to work on refining this goop. He created what he now knows as Vaseline, but convincing people to buy it wasn't easy at first. Imagine trying to sell something that came from oil rigs for skincare. Tough sell, right? Chesbrough would actually burn himself on purpose, and then apply Vaseline to show how it helped heal his skin. He was so convinced of Vaseline's benefits that he ate a spoonful of it every day. He claimed it was his secret to a long life, and he lived to be 96 years old. Imagine how long he would have lived if he didn't eat a spoonful of Vaseline every single day. Number 2, microwave oven. Percy Spencer was an engineer working on radar technology. One day, Percy's messing around with these things called magnetrons, which sounds like a villain from a sci-fi movie, but they're actually just fancy tubes that send out microwaves. So, Percy's standing there, probably thinking about what he's going to have for lunch. Then he reaches into his pocket and finds a disaster. His peanut butter candy bar had melted. That got him thinking, if microwaves can do that to a snack, what else could they do? So, he grabs some popcorn, throws it in front of the magnetron, and makes the world's first microwave popcorn. Percy decides to turn this discovery into a kitchen appliance. He whips up the Rada Range, a machine that costs a small fortune, weighs as much as a small car. Not exactly your countertop model. The Rada Range was a flop at first. People were scared of it, thinking it was some sort of radioactive monster. Also, it was $5,000. That's like choosing between a microwave and a decent used car. But by the 1970s, it's shrunk down to fit on your counter. It doesn't require you to sell a kidney to afford it. Suddenly, everyone wants one. Number 1, chocolate chip cookies. It's 1938, and Ruth Wakefield decides to bake a batch of chocolate cookies, but she's out of cocoa powder. Instead of running to the store, she decides to grab a bar of Nestle chocolate, chops it up into little chunks, and tosses them into her dough, thinking they'd melt and blend into the batter. But the chocolate gods had other plans. Those chunks stayed solid, making what we now bow down to as the chocolate chip cookie. She started selling these cookies, and needless to say, they were a big hit. So Nestle started selling pre-chopped chocolate. They slapped the cookie recipe on their packaging. In exchange, she got a lifetime supply of chocolate. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.
Whatever you do it for less at Harbor Freight.
Expedia helps you find the right time to book.
In 2006, in the city of Kyiv, Ukraine, police were called to deal with a confused man. When they arrived, they found a young man who was scared, didn't know where he was, and was dressed in strange, anachronistic clothing, carrying little did they know that they were possibly standing face to face with an actual time traveler. The man's name was Sergei Ponomarenko. When the police asked him for his ID, he handed it to them, and the first thing they noticed was that it was issued from a country that didn't exist anymore. The Soviet Union. Ukraine was, of course, part of the Soviet Union in the past, but the Soviet Union had dissolved almost a couple of decades ago at that point. So let's just say the police didn't see those IDs much anymore, especially on young people. As they looked like he was in his 20s. And yet his ID stated that his birthday was in 1932. And he matched the picture of the ID, so something didn't happen. When they asked him what day he thought it was, he answered April 23rd, 1958. And that's when the police said, okay, we're going to take you to a lower and to a nice doctor. Sergei winds up in a mental hospital in the care of Dr. Pavlo Kuchikov. So the doctor played along with this whole idea, and he asked him if he could figure out, if he could remember how he wound up in 2006, even though he thought it was 1958. And as recorded by the doctor, Sergei said, quote, it was daytime, and I went to go for a walk in the city. I took my camera, but when I left my house, I saw a strange object in a bell shape. And it was very strange, and it was flying in a straight line. It's difficult to explain what I was seeing. It might be better to look at the photos from the camera. Dr. Kuchikov was curious, so he got hold of the camera, and the first thing he noticed was that it was an old rare-ish reflex. The doctor was a bit of a photographer himself, so he recognized the brand and knew right away that this was like an antique, which is a problem because it uses a film that hadn't been manufactured since the 1970s. You can't just take it down to the CVS to get it developed, so he called in a photography expert named Vadim Korsner. Vadim got the film out and he was able to see from the real info that was manufactured in 1956. And it was in perfect condition. So he developed the roll, and this is when everything just kept getting weird. What he found on the roll were photos of Kiev, but clearly from a long time ago. All the cars, all the clothes, all the street signs, all were from the 50s. And there were photos of buildings that didn't exist anymore. And right there in front of those buildings was Sergei with his girlfriend at the time, out enjoying a beautiful day, wearing the exact same clothes that was found in. And the last photo on the rail, just as Sergei had suggested, featured a bell-shaped UFO. When the doctor asked him about the UFO photo, Sergei said, quote, now are you convinced I'm telling the truth? I so far do not understand what this object is and how something like that happened to me at the same moment when I took the picture. I went down to look at the camera and somehow I showed up in this mirror. Dr. Kuchikov, being scientifically minded, hypothesized that if this was some kind of alien spacecraft, it could perhaps have flown across the universe in speed of light and brought it back in a split second. And due to Einstein's theory of relativity, he would experience time dilation, meaning that time would have barely passed for him back in the past 47 years would go by. The flight of the navigator theory, if you will. That night, Sergei went back to his room, closed the door, and was never seen again. The hospital security camera captured when he entered the room, but it never filmed him leaving. There was only one way out of this room that was always watched, and the room's windows and doors, so there was no way for him to escape without being noticed. Yes, Sergei just pulled the Shawshank. Only there was no regular poster to explain what happened to him. He was never found. No means of escape were ever found. He just vanished, leaving the police with his camera, his photographs, and a crazy mystery to solve. A mystery that just keeps getting weirder. Because they investigated the case, they found out that there was actually a Sergei Ponomarenko that was declared missing in Kiev in 1960. They also were able to track down the woman who photographed his girlfriend, who was now pursuing her killings. She told the police that Sergei had disappeared that day in 1958, but returned just a few days later, the exact amount of time that he had been in 2006. But then she claimed that he disappeared again in the 1970s, and this time he was never seen again. But years after he vanished, she received a strange photo in the mail. It was from Sergei, and according to the note he wrote on there, the photo was from 2050. It shows an older mustachioed Sergei with Kiev in the background, only in this photo, the skylines full of skyscrapers. He also sent in the note that he would be back soon, which, for whatever reason, didn't happen. The story of Sergei Ponomarenko is going down the internet boards, possibly the most well-documented case of time travel in history. You know, now might be a good time to introduce you guys to 2.0. Big shout out to the video where I put on the woo-woo alarm for almost a full minute and people went apeshit in the comments. Yeah, that's enough of that. Look, It's a great story, okay? I totally get why it became such an urban legend. The problem is, everything that I could find on this, all the images that you've seen throughout this video, they all tie back to one TV show. It was a show called Aliens that aired on a Ukrainian channel called 1+1 in 2012. There were 10 episodes total. The episode that tells this story is the third episode. It's titled Time Traveler.
Hello, let me tell you about my new obsession, AFK Journey. AFK Journey is the first strategic card RPG in the 3D world.
It's an entire series about different stories of alien abductions and stuff. Other titles include Alien Abductions, Levitation Effect, Phantoms, and Crop Circles. And the show actually featured a disclaimer at the beginning that translates to, quote, "The Alien series aims to restore scenes of controversial topics. Any theory or hypothesis proposed cannot be considered to be correct, and further scientific research is required. All scene restorations are based on the statements of witnesses. There's no conclusive evidence to prove the existence of aliens. Your opinion on this issue is up to you." So yeah, the show itself says any theory proposed cannot be considered to be correct, which is more than you ever get from the History Channel. And it's also careful to point out that these are scene restorations. All these images of Sergei that keep showing up on every website and every video that talks about the story, those are all recreations. This is not real interview footage, which kind of feels obvious to me, but I guess I spend more time around cameras than most people. And besides, there's a few pretty glaring details that are wrong in this episode. For example, the security camera footage displays the time was Tuesday, April 23rd, 2006. But if you pull up a calendar app on your phone, you'll see that April 23rd, 2006 was actually a Sunday. Others have pointed out that the ID card that you see on the show has the seal of the Communist Youth League stamped on it, but it's not the actual seal from that time period. I'm sure the art director was good, but you can never beat the internet. And then there's a picture from 2050. It has buildings copied and pasted all over it, and I'm pretty sure that's the Empire State Building. So, minor Photoshop. But the point is, those are recreations. Again, the show says it right up at the beginning. Fine. But according to the story, there was an ID, there were photos, there was a recorded interview. So where are the real ones if they exist? All I can say is that my writer Jason and I, we searched all over the place and we couldn't find it anywhere. Nor could we find any actual police records, no other media reports, and I couldn't find anything on any of the key figures like Dr. Pablo Kuchikov or Madame Poisner. Granted, some people don't have much of a web presence, so there's definitely a language barrier here, but yeah, I couldn't find anything. Now, I don't know anything about this show. If you're in Ukraine and you know something about it, please feel free to educate me and everybody else in the comments. But it comes across like one of those History Channel type shows where they take some urban legend and then dramatize it. Like, I feel like this is just basically a good piece of creepypasta that the producers ran across and decided to run with. And they did a great job. Let's face it, they did a great job. It has taken on a life of its own. The credits list the scriptwriter is Konstantin Kovrigan, the director is Vladimir Rivas, and the producer is Alexei Lebak, and the executive producer is Oleg Rogozna, who owns the station. Any of whom I would love to ask directly about this, but I wasn't able to find a way to contact them. So for me, the overwhelming evidence here is that this is just a work of fiction. And a great story. It is a great story. But, like, don't take it any more seriously than you did that mermaid show on Animal Planet, which was actually a thing that happened. I hate this timeline. But I get it. I totally get it. Time travel is a fascinating subject, and a lot of thought's been put into how it would actually work. For example, a paper published in Classical and Quantum Gravity in September 2020 suggested there's actually a way to travel backwards in time. They looked at Einstein's theory of relativity, specifically its calculations that showed that it should be possible for an object in the universe to travel through space and time in a circular direction and end up back at the starting point. Einstein called it a closed timeline curve. But of course, physicists, when talking about time travel, they deal with paradoxes like the grandfather paradox, you know. That's the idea that a time traveler goes back in the past and kills a younger version of her grandfather. This, of course, means the time traveler's parents weren't born, along with the time traveler herself. If the time traveler didn't get born, then how would she have gone back to kill her grandfather? That whole thing. So the writers of this paper used what they called the billiard ball model to tackle this paradox. They say you imagine several billiard balls across a circular table. So when you push one ball away from position X, it goes around the table and hits the other balls in a particular pattern. The researchers calculated that even if the ball's pattern is messed with at some point during its journey, future interactions with the other balls can actually correct its path. The ball will come back to position X at the same speed that it would have if it hadn't been interfered with. Basically, the ball will fall into the same place. So they used this model to explain how if you did travel back in time, you could change events, but not significantly enough to really change the future. So like with the grandfather paradox, it would basically mean that something would always get in the way of you trying to kill him. As researcher Germaine Terrar said, quote, No matter what you did, the salient events would just recalibrate around you. Try as you might to create a paradox, the events will always adjust themselves to avoid inconsistency. Now, I think this paper is mostly just sort of an interesting thought experiment, but this does seem a bit like determinism. You know, like the idea that the world will just recalibrate around any changes you make in the timeline. It's kind of like a car navigation when you miss your exit. The big question, though, is what causes this recalibration? What holds this reality together? Is it a fundamental quantum force? The matrix? Power of Zoe? Unfortunately, it'll be a long time until we can test something like this and actually send an instrument or a person on a closed timeline curve. Until then, we'll just have to imagine it, which we've kind of been doing this whole time. I mean, one of the earliest ancient Sanskrit epic poems is called Mahabharata, and it was about time travel. I think maybe we're drawn into time travel stories because time is the most insidious force in our lives. Time marches on, it never stops. We are ultimately at its mercy, and the greatest fantasy we have is to escape its grip. As professor of science fiction studies at Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta, Lisa Yazek told Live Science in 2022, quote, time travel tales let us imagine that we can break free from the grip of linear time and somehow get a new perspective on the human experience, either as our own or as humanity as a whole. So maybe that's why this urban legend has struck such a chord online with everybody, you know? As disoriented and confused as he was, in some small way, we kind of all want to be Sergei. Okay, so this whole Sergei story kind of revolves around the whole idea that, you know, if you carried him around at the speed of light.
Yeah, I'll put the phone on charge for you. You're welcome. Okay, what are you doing over there? Get out of there. Your phone's over there. It's over there. Okay then.
Foundation for many other concepts of the scene. I've been saying for a while now, what's more important is that really it kind of changes from you just gotta see it. You know, there's this new layer of understanding of everything. Plus, it strengthens the problem solving muscle in the brain. So you're not just learning facts, you're learning how to think. This that keeps your brain sharper as you get older and gets you an edge in a world where, you know, everything just keeps getting harder. You know, when AI put you out the pasture, well, here's what we're going to do. So go be great. You can send it when you are $1 million organizations to job. Ways for you to try it out. If you're really getting bigger on the outside of your skull and sign up for the premium subscription, first you're going to do something 20% off the subscription. Get rid of that great sponsor over years. I've got this adding new interactive features all the time. It just keeps getting better. So give it a try. See how it changes your hours and extra job.
You need to take these 3 wasteful things off your grocery list. 1, plastic stick bags. These bags.
Chances are you've heard of the Voynich manuscript. The mysterious book that seems to be written in an unknown language that
Me?
nobody's ever been able to
Yeah.
translate. It features drawings of plants and animals that don't exist, and nobody knows who made it. I've done a video about it here. It's super famous, but
Feet are
it's not
hurting.
the only mysterious manuscript that's ever been found. There's actually a lot of them. In fact, I got a lot of comments on that Voynich video requesting that I talk about some of them. But yeah, all around the world, we've found documents that challenge what we think we know about history, stir up controversy, and sometimes just make no sense. So today we'll take a look at some of the most mysterious ancient manuscripts that have ever been found. In my episode about the world's weirdest form of writing, I talked about how we're in a bit of a language crisis. I mean, 9 languages a year are stopped being spoken worldwide. It's so bad that they predict that by 2080 we'll be losing a language every 2 weeks. And this is important because we lose ideas that are specific to cultures when a language dies. We lose records of time periods and people. We lose stories that were important to them at that time and could still have meaning in our lives today. And then there are the languages that we come across from our past that we can't understand, that even though we found them, its meaning is lost to us. What might be even weirder is when we find manuscripts or documents in languages we do understand, where we can decipher the information in it, but that information is weird. weird or out of place or out of time, or it's made in a way that we can't figure out. That's what these outcomes talk about is the big study. So we may find out that they're not real at some point in the future, but some of these have been studied thoroughly and are super legit. Which only brings up more questions. So let's start our treasure hunt. Where else? Egypt. In 1868, an Egyptian mummy made its way to the Museum of Sacred Revelation. It was an ordinary woman, nobody of any royalty or a priest or anything. All it was interesting was what she was wrapped in. It was linen strips with writing on it, which isn't that big a deal, but it wasn't Egyptian hieroglyphics. About 20 years later, the museum officials sent the wrappings to Vienna, and there the Austrian Egyptologist Jacob Kroll looked at them, and he figured out what the language was. It was actually Etruscan. Yeah, weirdly, for some reason, this mummy had been wrapped with strips from an Etruscan linen book. This was an incredible discovery, first of all, because Etruscan was not spoken in Egypt. It was an early kind of Roman language. But also, no surviving examples of Etruscan linen books have ever been found. Say Etruscan. Usually a linen book like this would have dissolved away over time, but Egypt's arid climate and materials that were used to dry the mummy helped preserve. This wasn't just the first Etruscan linen text that was found intact, it was also the longest Etruscan text ever found. The book was originally a sheet about 3.4 meters long before it was torn into strips from manuscripts. It contained 12 columns of text written in black and red ink, and it's thought that about 60% of the original text is still on there. They also found papyrus from the Egyptian mummy wrapping a mummy's body,
Bad dog.
give us a clue as to who she was. So,
Bad dog.
Linen, it's in Etruscan, we can read it. What was this thing actually about? Basically, it was just a calendar about which rites and sacrifices should be done throughout the year. There's certain gods mentioned, like Nethus, who was an Etruscan water god related to the Roman god Neptune. And some of the words and names in the text lead the experts to believe that it was
Sounds like first problem that maybe you should go to bed. Go to bed. What? What? I need to go to bed? I've been sleeping almost all day. What? I was really tired after getting these fucking dogs. You think that shit's easy and then bringing them back? That's when I don't have the fucking leash?
You didn't have a leash?
No.
So you brought them both back without a leash?
Oh, Roscoe just followed. Well, technically followed their dog. The owner was walking with me. But, you know, a little bit. Your hands broke? Yes.
So who watched these two?
They were sleeping.
Oh, they were sleeping.
Yeah.
Got home?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Part of the reason why I ended up falling asleep. That one gets out of bed and I'm going to have to put the gate up. Hey! That's why the baby's mean to you, by the way. You're mean to him. Serves you right. You learn your lesson? He slipped and fell.
Slipped himself.
Slipped.
Oh, slipped.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on.
I'm in bed.
Ever go jumping in the bed?
Kind of makes you think he was? Kind of makes you think he was? No one said you were jumping in bed. I said you slipped and fell. Did you slip and fall? Yeah. I don't know what he was doing necessarily. Get in bed. Crawl in bed. Are you broken? Are you broke? Are you broke?
actually is sensitive units that didn't tell the other science. Things like the creation of human, the nature of other celestial beings, and the nature of the universe. This also includes conversation between Jesus and Jesus and the week before Passover. All that's controversial, but its biggest controversy by far is the idea that Jesus actually asked Judas to betray him. Because he wanted somebody to betray him, his best friend. This, of course, challenges the version of Christianity. Some scholars say it goes as far as describing it as fiction or original forgery. It also offers up a different understanding of God, which, in the perfect world would be okay. There are viewpoints of so yeah, the veracity of this document is still very much under debate. Obviously, it's very old, but how accurate it is.
It's not hot.
It probably was hot. Where you going? Hey, where you going? Back in bed.
Hey, it's fine. I'll come back to bed. But I'm bringing it with Do you think the baby wants to bring Thomas to bed? Even you made us sleep with things that were hard and plastic. For example, objects referred to vessels and vessels. Yeah, these documents say that the Ark of the Covenant actually is. Maybe for some worry about him right now. You get your butt in bed.
Yeah, your bony butt.
Mom! Okay, baby's playing with ramen. Yeah.
Are you jealous?
Stop jumping. You did just jump. I saw you go flying in there. No, you're right. I didn't see you start the jump. I saw you mid-jump and like